When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ludlow, and enjoy today's episode. Hello, folks. This is Mark Ludlow with the Fearless Mindset Podcast. And today we have a business expert that knows business inside and out. The one and only Ron Worman from Seattle, the greater Seattle tech mecca of the world. How you doing, Ron?
Well, first of all, somebody in Seattle, maybe it's investment capitalists, maybe it's the mega tech companies that are trying to recruit people to Seattle. They love you now, Mark, because you're calling it the center of the world. That's good. You also do me this failure by calling me an expert. So now I'm really appreciate your setup on that. No matter what I say now, I'm not going to fulfill the expectations of your audience.
How you like those Golden Nuggets, audience? Keep your notepad, get your pen. Just Ron knows his stuff in business, so take notes. This is a good podcast.
I know some. Yeah, I've been on a journey like most people. And if I can share anything I've learned and still learning, by the way, that can help your audience, I'll be glad to. But it's great being on your podcast. I've listened to it a number of times, and you've been on mine, and so this is fun. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah, a little treat for a trade. Thanks for having me on the Great Conversation last year, folks. If you haven't listened to the Great Conversation, he's had many all-star big hitters, big icons in the industry on his podcast. Big Great Conversation. Look it up. Ron Worman. He's on LinkedIn. Follow him. Be a fanboy, fan girl. Get ready for his concert when he performs next in Seattle.
Yeah, the Great Conversation, by the way, Mark, is kind of a background for the audience. The Great Conversation came, quite frankly, from 40, 50 years ago, when I'm an avid reader, a voracious reader. I'm a student of history and philosophy. And I remember years ago in my, as a student, hearing that the compendium of knowledge, the corpus, if you will, of Western thought was called by historians and philosophers the Great Conversation. And so when I started the Great Conversation leadership series 22 years ago, because it was a physical event back then, the whole idea is how I, as a business guy, now that I had a client in security, the first client I had in security came 6 months after 9/11. And the CEO of this company was asking the question, what has changed? How will that strategically impact my company? And given that, how can I build a valuable company? And that's what I did. The Sage Group is an executive management consulting company, but it really came around small to mid-sized CEOs who had not taken venture capital yet and who would one day have to sell their company. And selling your company, by the way, could mean passing it on to your heirs. You're still selling it. It's a transaction of value. It could be selling it to your employees. It could be selling it to an investment banker, and it could be the public marketplace. It could be a competitor looking to build up its brand and its reputation and its bandwidth. So the Great Conversation started when I got into security, and I was fascinated by the servant leadership in the industry, Mark. Everyone I talked to, it was usually ex-military, law enforcement, agency background. And they had given their lives to a broken world, if you will, trying to maintain some kind of protection of both human assets and material assets. And because of that, the safety of our country, right? So they may work in a small space, but as an aggregate, they were protecting our country and the world around them. So I just fell in love with these people. And of course, then you go, how can I add value to their world? And what I noticed is they didn't have a bridge to how I thought. And that is, how do you strategically create a valuable company in your market sector, whoever you happen to be? How do you do that? And so I said, well, here's security trying to do its best to sell what they do to their company. And yet they didn't really have a good understanding of the business to be able to sell that value proposition. Right. And so they stumbled and fell. And they, think about 22 years ago when I started this, no one was talking about the value of security back then. They pat me on the head, Mark. Oh, good, Ron. You're a nice guy. I know you have good things at heart, but you obviously don't understand our industry. We're a cost center. And I go, nothing's a cost center. Sorry.
Wow.
Nothing is a cost center. I'm going to make my priorities as a CEO, and I'm going to understand very quickly what you can do and can't do to help my company grow. And so then the great conversation became, how can I bring the whole industry together? Whether you're a consultant, an integrator, a manufacturer, a CSO and their team, how can I bring the whole industry together to really say, how do we raise our game so that this industry becomes incredibly valuable to its customers, which is the CEO and their team, to its customers. No matter who you were in that industry, ultimately it boiled down to the CEO's main job is to navigate risk and opportunity. That's their main job. The result of how they do that creates revenue, creates profit, and creates a strategic position in the marketplace that can be protected, defended, and extended. So that's a quick background how the great conversation came together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that. I love how you built the history behind that 20-year run. That's pretty amazing. I mean, in 20 years, you've seen so many fluctuations, so many growths, so many not so much growth. You've seen people make mistakes. You've seen people that go bankrupt. I mean, what is your advice to the listeners that are going into 2023 trying to figure out, interest rates are going up, what should I do? Should I hold my money, hold on to cash? Is cash king right now? We have interest rates pushing 7%. Why theories are saying it may hit 12% by the middle of the year. Who knows? Can you give some business advice to the folks listening that are trying to make decisions?
Wow. Well, that's a big circle of people called folks, right?
Folks, right?
So if it's a security guard, or it's a risk consultant, or it's a integrator, or it's a manufacturer, or it's a CEO trying to navigate risk and opportunities in market sector. So let me, first state that's a big thing to try, right? I have no idea. I have no idea who's going to listen to this. So let's start with some basics, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Wherever you are, you've got to be able to define it. Wherever you are, you've got to be able to define it. So whatever position you hold, whatever company you're running, Mr. CEO, Mrs. CEO, whatever you are, you have to be able to articulate where you are. And to do that, you have to understand the ecosystem around you. So if we want to just pick a role, Mark, let's have some fun. Let's take that concept and apply it to anything. Give me a role of somebody who's going to be listening to this podcast, and let's have fun with it. Let's see if we can tease it.
I like that. Great idea. Let's say you're a CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and your goal is to predict the baseline bottom line for the company, and your report is to the CEO. Why are all these companies getting, we're seeing all over the news, CNBC, lay it up. What are they planning for?
What are they planning for? Is that what you said?
Right.
Okay.
What are they planning for?
What a great line. What are they planning for? You could have gone anywhere because you started with CFO job is to protect, the profits of the company, to protect the revenue of the company, right? What are they planning for? And right before that, you suggest that many of them are laying off, right? So I'm just setting some preconditions here. Let's go back though to my comment. Wherever you are, you need to be able to articulate what it is, what you do, and the why behind it. So a CFO's main role, remember I said the CEO's main role is navigating risk and opportunity. Everything else falls from their ability to be able to do that, how they construct their executive team, how they set the cultural engagement of their company. Everything is around navigating risk and opportunity. If that is so, CFO now is part of my team. Guess what? Their main job is not protecting the profits of the company. Main job of the CFO is to actually be the investment counselor for the company on where funds should be invested to achieve the organizational outcomes that the executive team have agreed on. Right? That's their main job. So if they see themselves as a cop on the finances of the company, wrong consciousness of the CFO. They're not the cop.
Wow.
They're not the cop. So CFOs, if you want to call me, and we'll have a great conversation if you disagree, they are the organizational enabler of the investment the company has in achieving outcomes that matter.
Oh, wow.
So if that is true, and you're going to be part of an organization of leadership, hey, chief security officers, if you're going to interview for a job, you should be asking what the CFOs to the CFO, what they think their main job is.
Great interview question.
Right?
Ooh, and if so, a stickler.
And if so, how do they actually navigate those priorities? You can't just say layoffs because you don't know the process of thinking behind those layoffs. So you can't understand them. And unfortunately, most employees sitting in their offices worried about Amazon, Amazon's CEO talking about we're going to lay off another 13,000 people. Can you imagine that? Going, I wonder if it's me. Do I fit within their priorities? Can you even imagine dealing with that? Question marks are a terrible thing to give to your culture. And Andy Jassy, if you and I were to talk about it one day, but I know you have certain amount of compliance with the SEC, that you have to divulge certain things that are material to the business. But my goodness, your people are left to imagine the worst.
Just the stress, emotional distress they're under. Oh, I get my severance package. Well, I get 6 months of unemployment so I can find another job. Or I got a mortgage to pay. I got kids to pay for. I got medical insurance I'm losing. That's a lot of stress.
Right. So that's a good segue, by the way. Now we said, hopefully that satisfied your answer. We took what I said, you got to know who you are, be able to articulate the real objective of your position, understand the ecosystem around you, which in the CFO's context would be the executive team and the culture of the company and the vendors that go to support the mission. If I've done a right job as a CFO, remember, I'm helping them be the investment counselor of the business. I need to know how all these pieces work because the recommendations I make are going to be material to those investments, right? So I better really know how they all function and work. And you can imagine now if we turn to our security leaders who are trying to justify their budget, you're not there to justify your budget. Sorry.
Wow, that's profound.
I don't want to hear that language from you. You're there to understand how you support the vision, mission, and execution of the strategic value of the company. The budget is a tool by which you fund that. But if you're talking about protecting that, then it's the wrong focus. if that makes sense.
He flipped a switch when he said all that. Holy cow.
Well, I just got off a phone call where we were talking about, this is a segue again. So
no problem. No for it.
But here's the curveball, right?
Yeah.
And I have the blessing in my life to be able to listen to different lectures now. I have lots of free time. I'm actually writing a book right now, and all these things I couldn't have done in the midst of building the Sage Group. But now that I am in my later years, I can refire my how I allocate my resources and my time. Right?
Did you hear that one word that I said? Oh, you're that. I'm not. No, I'm not. That retired word did not exist in your vocabulary.
So I just got off a lecture.
Oh yeah, cool.
And I'm gonna read from my notes here. And they were talking about why people inside companies who have jobs are so disengaged. That is, they go through the motions, but they aren't actively engaged in the vision, mission, growth of your company. They're doing the job. A lot of people are like that right now.
What is their why?
Yeah, exactly. So what's going on here? Then the CEO, by the way, this is a big issue for CEOs. How do I get my people engaged? And you see where they react. Howard Schultz goes, it must be because they're not working in our offices anymore. Let's send them back to the office. Oh, they don't do it voluntarily. Let's demand they go back to the office, right? So we got to get them back to the office. So you start seeing all these Band-Aids by which we can get them engaged. You hire an organizational leadership coach. Right. And they're going to come in and give everyone personality tests. And then we're going to understand each other's personality and everything. And there's one gaping hole, and you nailed it. Let alone, you nailed it. And that is, who is ever, what manager or leader has ever come to you to understand your personal why and help you navigate how it intersects with the why of the business? Who's ever done that for you, Mark?
Nobody's ever done that for me.
Because leaders are taught formulaic things in business schools, and they get HR review cycles, but no one ever goes into your why. Mark, I want to know your why. If you're working with me, for me, I want to know your why. And I want to help you. Notice I said help, because I can't do it on my own for you. How it intersects with the why of the organization.
Now, is that why question, is that in DNA of the human work ethic? Is that demanded by leadership?
I love the fact that you tied it to this elusive term DNA. Let's go to something real. I just made this statement on a Zoom call in a small session around organizational cultures. And I said, most manager leaders are trying to maximize potential. They're trying to increase efficiencies, right? That's not a bad thing, but it's not the whole thing. And then their employees are trying to realize who they are, self-actualize. Now, on that side of the equation, most of us are lost, right? Because we don't understand that the why depends on our worldview, and the worldview will set your priorities. If you don't have a worldview, and think of it as a pyramid for a second, the worldview at the top, the small triangle at the top, the worldview should infuse all your behaviors, your process by which you achieve things. the process by which you create things, the process by which I deal with you as a human being. It should do that. So if that's vacant, what do we all do? We're playing life by the seat of our pants, aren't we?
We're a bunch of lost Marines in the field trying to figure out what our mission is.
Oh, in fact, I love that you brought that up. We're in the trenches. There's real ammo going over our heads. And we're looking at the guy next to me and saying, do you have my back? And do you care? Do you care about me as a human being? If I die in this war called life, will I have mattered? Will I have mattered?
And I hear the biggest complaint right now in the workforce, the culture attitude is there's no work ethic in the workforce right now in America across the country. Can you explain why that exists? Or is that the family foundation issue, or is that just what we accept?
I think you just said, I was having a hard time hearing you. My apologies. But I think what you just said is a lot of people believe, that's phrase right there is really interesting, that we have a fundamental dissolution of a ethic of work. Is that what you just said?
That's what I said.
Okay. And why do you believe that? Why do you think people in your ecosystem generally believe that? Why do you think that is?
From different business owners that I know throughout the country that I talk to, they say they can't find anybody that wants to work. They'd rather sit at home, play video games, collect the government assistance, and just there's no identity. They maybe lost their identity. They don't feel the value of why should I go work? And they'd rather sit at home. I hear this from my buddies that own construction companies. They'd rather sit, these 8 workers rather sit at home, drink all day, all night, smoke pot, and play video games. Well, there's nothing wrong. We have those brains to do those things, but there's a lack of character, lack of work ethic right now. And it started during the pandemic. Maybe it started before the pandemic. I don't know. That's what I'm hearing in the conversation today. And people just don't want to go back to work.
Yeah. I had a conversation with a family member over dinner the other night. A younger generation family member, and who's very successful, by the way. But his view of work was whatever it takes to get paid. No more, no less. Interesting. Let's just set that to the side for a second. And I said so intrinsically, work has no value to you except to get paid. Is that a correct statement? Yeah, that's true. So now let's overlay that statement and see if we can understand what's going on in the culture right now. If I get up on Monday and I'm not excited about going to work, and I can't wait till Friday, thank God it's Friday, is my cultural value. And I hope I have enough money when I retire so I can travel around and do whatever the heck I want. And the man can't tell me what to do. That's a hell of a way to live a life, isn't it?
It's almost free.
Almost what?
It's almost free. A spirit of like a butterfly, do whatever you want to do without any consequences.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think all of us who've lived long enough know that everything has a consequence, right? I used to say, if I could study your behaviors, if I could look at your checkbook, I could understand your priorities. I could understand your worldview, right? But yes, I do think generally, again, not everyone, but generally, we are receiving as a consequence of our school systems, our disappointment in business leaders who are obviously generally not really caring about us, but more about what they do and what value they get out of their company for their own sakes. I think that all is coming home to roost, right? I think most Henry David Thoreau, a great American philosopher, said most people live lives of quiet desperation. And he said that in the 1700s. So this is not new, is it, Mark? This is not new.
History has a way of repeating itself.
It's just not new. And so then we ask, if I'm privileged enough to have a work ethic grounded in a worldview that says everything I do matters. There's this great line, I'll read it. The world languishes to the degree you are not all you can be. The world languishes. John Donne, a great poet, said, no man is an island. There's this inherent philosophy or worldview that says I matter. In my podcast, as you know, I start off everything by saying ideas matter. They shape markets, they shape our lives, they shape the world, they change the world, right? Ideas matter. And yet, there's a great group of us who don't think it does, that we don't matter, that our individual actions are recognized and therefore don't matter. There was one CSO I was coaching a while back, and he was pretty much, I've heard this for 22 years, by the way, since I got into the security market, pretty much talking about how he didn't have a seat at the table. The good old executive management team table. Didn't have a seat at the table. And I said, that doesn't matter as long as your ideas are at the table.
Wow, that is so powerful.
It's nice to get a title. It's nice to get a seat at the table, but it still doesn't mean your ideas matter unless you choose to integrate them into the others around you who are trying to sort through the same dilemma as you, and that is how to build a powerful company, a valuable company. And so stop trying to get a seat at the table and try to get your ideas accepted before. And then it's a fait accompli, because if your ideas are accepted sooner or later, you'll be more recognized, if you will. That, not always, but pretty much true. I used to coach young executives years ago, and they would say, what's the quickest way to get your job? And I said, start acting like you're already in it.
Boom. That's simple.
Start acting like you're already in it.
A mind shift.
It's a little bit of a mind shift. But let's go back to your original question, because I felt, it's so cool, Mark, because you personally relate to all the people you talk to, some of which end up on this podcast. And I can tell you care. What's going on in this country where people don't feel they matter anymore?
Wow, I think that's what it is.
If they're going to sit home and watch video games, it's more than just they prefer the video games. It's kind of like, what's that old? I apologize to all the people who are alcoholics, because I'm not, and I haven't been through the program, but I think one of the strategies is that these compulsions. What the antidote to a compulsion is having essentially another compulsion. You want to trigger off this compulsion to something else that takes your focus, that matters more than this compulsion, right?
Is that getting that dopamine hit? So like that? It's like getting the dopamine hit in a different way.
Yeah, in a different way, right? I remember a friend of mine who was an alcoholic started golfing every morning, rain or shine. And I go, what are you doing that? He goes, it just helps me. It turns my mindset to wanting to drink to golf. So he replaced it. It was a trigger to golf, right? And in some people, it would be, going to a meeting, just to remember who they are. And I say remember because it's a reconstitution, if you will, of who you really are. You're not about drink. You're something more than drink. So you're something more than a security guard. You're something more than a risk consultant. You're something more than a vice president of security. You're something more than a sales rep for a video camera company. You're something more than that. So, find your core values, understanding matter to the world, make sure it intersects with the core values of the company, the big why of the company. And then you're going to be okay. You'll be able to navigate the twists and turns of fate. If you lose your job, if you lose a loved one, right? You will be able to navigate if you get that pyramid right. You'll be able to navigate because you matter no matter what.